You wouldn't have whistleblowers without whistleblower attorneys. I would like now to welcome Stephen Kohn. Stephen is one of the nation's leading whistleblower and QTAM attorneys, as well as the chairman of the board and co-founder of the National Whistleblower Center. He is also the author of 8 books on whistleblowing law, including the new Whistleblower's Handbook. Stephen?
Thank you, Jane. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you, every whistleblower. Thank you, those who are fighting for them. Every year, I give a small talk on the origins of National Whistleblower Day and what this means. Even though some of you may have heard it before, you can't hear it enough. I've grown up in the Jewish tradition, and at Passover, we would always tell certain stories of liberation because they're important to remind us of the mission. So that's why I'm here today. In 1777, about 6 months after the Declaration of Independence was signed, 10 sailors and Marines met on a boat called Warren off of Providence Harbor. They were the first whistleblowers of the new United States of America. We were involved in a revolution in which the founding fathers would be hung for treason if they lost that war. This was not about polls or elections or donations. This was life or death. This was a struggle to create a democratic society on the planet Earth. And it was a war. And these 10 sailors and Marines met. And they decided they had to blow the whistle on the Commodore of the U.S. Navy, the head naval officer whose brother had signed the Declaration of Independence and served as the governor of Rhode Island. Just like today, it was the powerful that had abused their authority. And they signed a petition, and one of their members jumped ship and traveled to Philadelphia and presented the 10 petitions. And he was asked, he was a captain, John Grannis. He was asked, did you have permission to leave that ship and come to Philadelphia? The transcript has been preserved. His answer was simple, no. The Continental Congress Marine Committee met, and then it went to the Continental Congress itself. They read the petitions. They listened to Grannis's testimony. How many whistleblowers need someone to listen to their testimony? Our founding fathers, in the middle of the revolution, when their lives were on the line, listened to the testimony of the whistleblower. They suspended the Commodore of the Navy. They acted on that information. And that suspension was signed by none other than John Hancock, the same person who signed the Declaration of Independence with the big letters. Well, we all know what happens to whistleblowers. The Commodore was not a happy person. So he decides to retaliate. Have we not seen this before? And in the state of Rhode Island, where he had the connections and the power, he sued for criminal libel those 10 whistleblowers, caught up with 2 of them, and threw them in jail. And he's going to triumph for seditious libel. Those 2 whistleblowers wrote a letter from prison that has been preserved. They wrote a letter from prison. And you've heard it today by the MP from the UK, how whistleblower after whistleblower says, I was only doing my job. Let's see what they wrote in 1778 from a jail cell. This is to Congress. Your petitioners not being persons of affluent fortunes, but young men who have spent their time in service to their country, finding themselves arrested for doing what they believed and still believed was nothing but their duty. Held to bail in a state where they were strangers against a powerful, artful person who has all the advantages. And in the present war, he's amassed great wealth. We know about that too. Humbly ask Congress for help. That letter made it to the Congress, and the Congress met again on July 30th, today, 241 years ago. Today is the Whistleblowers' Day, because our founding fathers, in the middle of that revolution, gathered again, and they passed what I believe is the first whistleblower law on earth, but clearly the first whistleblower law of the new United States of America. And this is what they wrote, passed unanimously. It is the duty of all persons in service of the United States, government employees, as well as all other inhabitants, to give the earliest information to Congress or any other proper authority of misconduct, frauds, and misdemeanors. It was the duty. They didn't care that a revolution was breaking out. They didn't care that they were fighting the British. It was the duty to come forward if you see the corruption. July 30th, 1778, in the middle of our revolution. And then they went 2 steps further. And this is the first time this has ever happened. And as an attorney, I find this particularly important. They voted to hire top-notch lawyer in Rhode Island to defend those whistleblowers. They weren't going to let their poverty and their imprisonment block justice. They hired a lawyer who would later become the Attorney General of that state to defend them. Then they went 1 step further. Believe me, there was no Freedom of Information Act, but they released all the documents that had been presented to Congress on their whistleblowing, including the documents about mistreating British prisoners, highly embarrassing to the United States during the middle of a war. And those whistleblowers won their case, not guilty. And the Commodore had to pay their court costs. And then we researched. I sent my interns to the National Archives, and they found the check cut, $1,400, for those lawyers. And believe me, as anyone knows who has studied the American Revolution, every penny was important. They needed to buy guns. They needed to buy ammunition to fight the British. But guess what? They needed to buy justice and make sure the United States was created on the proper footing. July 30th, 1778, July 30th, 2019. Thank you very much.